G'day there and welcome to Faith, Culture, Politics in Australia with Mark. And I'm coming to you on a bit of a South Australian focused stream today. And as the title says, a message to South Australian Police. And I want to thank the Aligned Council for Australia for motivating me to put this message out. Obviously doing this via my various platforms. It's then in the public domain, unless, of course, censorship gets to a point where I'm removed off all my platforms. But for now, this is a public announcement, and with thanks to Aligned Council of Australia for providing the motivation for me to do this. I'm going to talk into a bit of a message to South Australian Police and then a couple of other little topics, and then we'll finish up and hopefully not make it too long. But you never know with me. Sometimes it can go on a bit. So, look, at the end of the day, I'll just get into it. I'm going to be reading from a little bit of a statement I put together with with motivation from Aligned Council of Australia, who've put some recommendations out in regards to letters to police nationally, but I'm focusing this on South Australia Police, including obviously some other things, because it talks into some other things that are relevant to our state here in South Australia. So look, I'm going to share my screen and get that up there now for you, and we'll go through this review. And I'm just going to read that out, so hopefully you can see that big enough. But we'll start. Attention, urgent information for all South Australian police officers. Dear officers, regarding World Health Organization 2024 International Health Regulation Amendments. As you are a valued member of the Australian Police Force, I wish to bring to your attention recent changes to the World Health Organization, the WHO, International Health Regulations, IHR, which carry significant implications for your role. The 2024 IHR amendments are now binding on Australia, with full implementation into domestic law required by 19th of September 2025. These amendments expand the WHO's authority to issue highly influential recommendations during both declared and anticipated public health emergencies. While the WHO cannot directly enforce measures, these recommendations are typically adopted at the national level, as seen during COVID-19 pandemic, and you may be called upon to enforce them. Some of these changes could take place, police officers in ethically and legally difficult situations. So it could place police officers in ethically and legally difficult situations. What police officers should know about the 2024 IHR amendments. The amended IHR create a framework for WHO recommended lockdowns, quarantine and isolation, surveillance and digital health documentation, and even forced medical procedures. Police may be asked to enforce these measures, even if they raise concerns about civil liberties or constitutional rights. Lockdown, border control, and movement restrictions. Article 18 and 31, police could be tasked with enforcing lockdowns, border closures, travel bans, and quarantine zones, even without a formally declared emergency. Preemptive surveillance in Annex 1. The IHR now require ongoing surveillance of potential or suspected events. Police may be asked to assist public health or intelligence agencies in monitoring individuals or communities flagged as potential risks, even when no outbreak has occurred. Medical measures without consent. Article 31, Section 2. If a government determines there is an imminent public health risk, it may compel vaccination, quarantine, or medical examination without consent, in line with domestic law. Police may be required to detain or escort non-compliant individuals, including those asserting bodily autonomy. Now, it's really interesting to note here that the Emergency Management Plan for South Australia already had the provision for a lot of these things in there as well. And this is obviously coming through from the WHO. So in line. So, looking at this, it's in line with domestic law. All right, so this is recommendations from the WHO, but let's have a look at South Australia specific. On top of the above specific to South Australia, the South Australian Parliament has passed the Emergency Management Miscellaneous Amendment Bill 2024 legislation, which raises further concerns such as state of alert, a new emergency declaration category. It expands the timeframe and flexibility under which emergency powers can be activated, potentially leading to prolonged or unjustified use. The language is broad, raising concerns about scope creep, where temporary powers might become normalised. New power to require information and documents. Concerns include ambiguity in what qualifies as information and or documents, potentially undermining privacy and due process, and lack of clarity around refusal of rights or oversight mechanisms for such demands. Appointment of State Recovery Coordinator. While designed for efficiency, it centralises substantial authority during a recovery phase, and the roles, powers, oversight and accountability measures are not yet fully transparent. And also ask yourself as well, how could these powers be used in line with the state declaration of a climate emergency? So look, if you tie our Emergency Management Act in with the WHO regulations, the IHR, there's a bit of a pattern that's starting already, and South Australia is getting in off the front foot by the look of it, in regards to obviously the WHO, the strong WHO recommendations that might come through in regards to the international health regulations. So if we have a look at the context around COVID-19 and the WHO's expanding powers, you will recall the significant role police played during COVID-19, often under challenging and divisive circumstances. Since then, the WHO has moved to consolidate authority for future pandemic responses, including through the International Health Regulation amendments and the pending pandemic agreement. Despite the rarity of true global pandemics, the last before COVID was over a century ago with the Spanish flu. The WHO now frames future pandemics as inevitable and imminent, demanding sweeping control mechanisms that deeply affect national sovereignty and individual rights. So they're demanding the sweeping control mechanisms from partner states, which obviously Australia is, but South Australia, with its emergency management legislation, seems to talk right into these concerns. So how could this affect you? As a police officer, you could be required to physically restrain citizens to enforce compliance with mandatory health orders, including on vaccination or quarantine, navigate ethical conflicts between following government directions and upholding human rights and bodily autonomy, face legal or professional risk from enforcement actions later deemed unlawful or unethical. These scenarios may involve colleagues, family members, or members of the public exercising their rights to refuse medical interventions, as what happened through COVID-19. Why this matters? Your duty is to uphold the law, but also to protect the rights and freedoms of Australians. The 2024 IHR, the new Emergency Management Miscellaneous Amendment Bill 2024 here in South Australia, in South Australia's declaration of a climate emergency, could put you in direct conflict between government directions and fundamental civil liberties. Understanding these implications now is critical. What you can do, if this raises concerns for you, there's plenty of things you can do. Engage your union and state police minister. Ask both of them to review the International Health Recommendation Amendments and the Emergency Management Miscellaneous Amendment Bill 2024 for South Australia, and take a position. For the IHRs, urge them to write to the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister and Health Minister requesting Australia reject these amendments. Know your boundaries. Understand your legal and ethical obligations, especially around use of force, informed consenting medical procedures. Seek legal support if orders appear to conflict with your professional duties or conscience. Get more informed and raise awareness. Keep up to date with current information from Aligned Council of Australia at www.alignedcouncilofaustralia.com.au, and former WHO scientist and Australian Dr. David Bell, and share this information with colleagues. Consider that your loved ones may be one day be among those affected by the laws you're asked to enforce. In summary, the 2024 International Health Regulation Amendments, the new Emergency Management Miscellaneous Amendment Bill 2024 South Australia, and South Australia's State Declaration of a Climate Emergency could fundamentally reshape your role as a police officer in the future public health and other emergencies. You may be asked to enforce controversial or coercive measures without clear legal justification or democratic scrutiny. By staying informed, engaging early, and understanding your rights and powers, you can help protect your integrity and the freedoms of the Australian people. Thank you for your service and commitment to our communities. Mark Neugebauer. So I've written that message with some help from, or some guidance from the Aligned Council of Australia, and you can find more on the Aligned Council of Australia website. And if you just go along here to across the top, media, the WHO, there's some drop downs there about pandemic regulations, One Health and Pandemic Treaty for people to learn more about this in more detail, and resources, the resources tab as well. So look, I highly recommend people follow that and have a look and see about that information and discern your actions or potential actions in any declared emergency or perceived declared emergency. It's really, really important, because look, at the end of the day, we're just everyday Australians. Many of us are so concerned about what's going on in regards to the incremental powers from the government in regards to legislation and so forth. And so I kind of wanted to talk into this and share that, and so it's out in the public realm, my message to South Australia Police, and you yourself can jump onto, if you're just a citizen of South Australia or anywhere else, you can jump on there on the Aligned Council of Australia site and have a look at those resources that are there. So I recommend you you download information there to tailor a specific message for yourself in regards to these things and talking into these things. So wanted to talk into that, but also just wanted to move on, and seeing that it's kind of quite relevant in the whole discussion around people that are critical of government and critical of decisions and so forth, that we're all kind of framed in the same framework, tarred with the same brush, as a very, very small percentage, very minute percentage of people that might be pushed over the edge and take things too far in regards to what's been happening in this government overreach, and then their inquiries in regards to what they can do to push back because they've sort of left with a lot of times no choice. But the vast majority, 99% of Australians and South Australians who would be going out on rallies and pushing back on government overreach are just your average Australians, mum and dads, grandparents, young adults, whoever they are, just ordinary everyday Aussies, just going, well, this isn't right, and where's the accountability for government? Where's the where is the transparency, and how do we get our voices heard? So, and we're tarred with the same brush. But this, and plenty of media have been talking about it. Well, I shared about the ABC putting a piece out about the rallies coming up in regards to anti-vaxxers and sovereign citizens, and all these labels that they want to throw out to evoke a response from the rest of the public that might not be fully aware that their rights and liberties have been further impinged upon. So, but I kind of wanted to share this little article out of New Daily. And just talking to that, put a bit of an article together, combating the sovereign citizen movement and the industry that fuels it. So this is talking about the sort of, they've put it on here, the Know Your Rights group, and these sort of groups that are that what they're talking about is the sort of groups that are asking for funding for people to be able to get information about how they can push back on government overreach, or get out of not complying with certain things. So this is a bit of an article put together by them, and of course labelled it and thrown it in with the Parapunka incident, and obviously the one that happened up in Brisbane, and other things. So look, these articles come through thick and fast. But look, at the end of this article, they did talk into a little bit about the reasoning. So obviously people can read through this article, and as always with all my streams, I'll upload it to my Substack, and the links will be included in the Substack, and it's free, obviously, to subscribe. It's obviously free subscription, but if you'd like to support, then obviously you can do that as well. But if we have a look at this, the last little bit, so they've obviously talked into detail about other things, linking the average Aussie that's pushing back on a lot of stuff, and linking them in with the whole sovereign citizen idea and all this. And look, 99% of people wouldn't even identify with that label as well, because I've covered that before. But if you have a look here at the sort of end of the article, it's sort of talking a little bit about sort of cause and effect. So I'll just read this a little bit down. When COVID restrictions eased, we hoped pseudo-law would fade. Their words, it has not. The ideas remain supported by a marketplace of gurus, websites, and social media groups that sell defiance as liberation. Adherents remain motivated by their conviction that the system is rigged. But here's the kicker, the article goes on to say, they are not wrong. Inequality is growing, and modern legal systems favour the wealthy and powerful. Access to justice is expensive, and ordinary people routinely feel steamrolled by bureaucracy and banks. Instead of finding real remedies, however, they bought legal misinformation and conspiracy theorists. Now, that's their words as well. This misinformation gets thrown around a lot, and it's been weaponized over the COVID period, and we've seen how fact-check sites have been called out for their wrongful, misleading reporting, to label everything as misinformation, mis and disinformation. And the whole thing about conspiracy theories are pushed back on really hard as well, because a lot of things that were talked about during the COVID era, a lot of those things have actually come to fruition and true. To combat pseudo-law, their word, we must understand the commercial industry that fuels it. So talking about the people offering advice based on financial gain, and work on shutting it down. So talking about getting it legislated out, or more government control on these things. But the challenge for governments is to respond without feeding the narrative of inequality and tyranny. Heavy-handed crackdowns risk confirming the worldview adherents already hold. Ignoring pseudo-law does not work either. So that actually does talk into very much the issue in regards to what the majority of people that have been out in the streets protesting, even through COVID, is this government overreach and control and lack of transparency and unaccountability has pushed people to get out on the street and want to march and get involved, and they can't all be labelled as people that want to go to these sites that want to stop paying bills, or stop paying council rates, or stop paying fines, or whatever. The vast majority of people pushing back now, challenging government, just 99% of your average mum and dads, average Australian, that just wants government control curtailed. So continuing reading, if we were to reduce daily disruptions and violent eruptions, the focus must shift from the spectacle to the structure. We must work to make a government a legal system in society where legal conspiracies are not a narrative. But the thing is they haven't addressed this properly, and this is why it's pushing people to look at alternatives. So this lays fairly and squarely at the feet of government and bureaucracy. And the people that wrote this article is Harry Hobbs is an associate professor in the Faculty of Law, Justice at the University of New South Wales, and Stephen Young is an associate professor in the Faculty of Law at the University of Otago. So look, and obviously that article talks into a lot more, and people can check that out themselves. But it really, that last little bit highlights the key point here is that it lays fairly and squarely on the feet of media reporting government inaction and bureaucratic overreach. We're talking about unaccountability, we're talking about overreach of government, we're talking about no transparency. So, and this is the point that many people are trying to make. All right, and this is the point that I was making with the statement to the South Australian Police. Please don't be dictated to by the media that deliberately sows division. Mainstream media deliberately sows division and hate towards anybody that challenges government. My assertion is that the media is much more of an arm of the state, a tool of the state, than they are the fourth estate. And government happily laps it up and targets people like myself and many others who are challenging government overreach and corruption, right? So look, and at the end of the day, you know, the article, you know, could have been a little bit more robust, right? So it lacks nuance and motivations. While the article emphasises exploitation, it touches less on why individuals are drawn in, such emotional crisis, distrust of government, or a desire for empowerment. You know, it's limited the discussion and potential remedies. You know, it urges regulation, but doesn't explore the detail how to balance cracking down on pseudo law while preserving civil liberties and genuine dissent. Although it raises the problem effectively, the article doesn't delve into legal, educational, community-based strategies for prevention and resilience. You know, so look, there's so much more that article could have talked into in regards to the pain and suffering and the unhealed hurt and trauma of the last 5 years during COVID and the response to that. And I'll be talking a lot more into this between now and March for the election, and hoping to get some people on the podcast to talk into those sorts of topics in much more detail. So, look, I am going to attend the rally on the 13th. That's here in Adelaide, and it'll start at Rundle Park on Saturday, the 13th of September. And I encourage as many South Australians as possible to get out there. I really love to see a doubling or a tripling of the event that happened a couple of weeks ago, and so I'll be there, and there's lots to get on the street for, and some of those I've talked about before. You know, we talk about if we're talking about state-based issues, you know, I've talked about these: government mismanagement, emergency management bill, climate change emergency declaration, unsustainable renewable energy push, exceptionally high power prices, housing crisis, cost of living crisis, business bankrupt and struggling, failing farmers, OPA guardianship, SACAT mismanagement, algae bloom mismanagement, smart cities initiatives, the growing state debt, failed state-based voice to parliament, puberty blockers for children, sexualised and gender fluidity content in schools, fetal termination up to birth, surveillance state, hospital ramping and health mismanagement, you know, and there's so many other national issues to chuck on top of that. And so there's many things that the average Australian is actually frustrated about. That they aren't getting any relief from. There's no accountability, there's no transparency, and there's more controls being enacted by the government. So, look, I'll be there, and as I've mentioned in a recent article, is that I'm actually throwing my hat in the ring to sit on to hopefully get a spot as an independent in the Legislative Council here in South Australia. So if people are interested and first I need over 250 nominators. So that's people saying that they're actually signing to nominate me for the spot of a independent candidate for the Legislative Council. So if people are there on Saturday, I'll be there at 11 o'clock there at Rundle Park near the stands there, or bleachers, I think they call them. And if you'd like to support me in that attempt to try and get into the Legislative Council, because I'm a firm believer that there needs to be a bigger separation of powers in the government, and that's also why I'm involved with the Australians for Better Government, and so specifically in the Senate and the Legislative Council. I believe it shouldn't be party affiliated. I believe the Senate and the Legislative Council should be full of independents, so people not aligned with political parties, because it is a house of review, and any legislation that's put forward should be heavily scrutinised and reviewed by independents that aren't party aligned, and unfortunately that's not what's happening at the moment. So if you'd like to support that that cause of mine, then I'm happy to meet people there at 11 o'clock on Saturday, and I'll have some forms there if people are willing to fill them out. So just moving along to another sort of changing tact a little bit, or changing direction of where we've been, but it kind of still ties in about the brutality we saw over COVID, and especially we've talked about Victoria, how much they've been hit, and a really tragic story has come out of Nepal, and I really wanted to talk into this as well. And I just need to say as well, we talked about this immigration thing happening, and a lot of talking about being racist and all these sorts of things, and pushing back on mass immigration. But we know, and I've talked about it openly before, that I've worked with some wonderful, amazing human beings that have embraced Australia and called Australia home from many parts of the world. Whether it be Europe and Africa, whether it be China, whether it be India, whether it be including Nepal. I worked with some amazing Nepalese people. There's just such a beautiful heart, and that's why I also wanted to talk into this particular topic, and this particular story from the Australian Free Independent Press Network, and it's just so tragic and sad that I just wanted to share that with you. So this story from the Australian Free Independent Press, talking about this breaking blood on the streets of Nepal. Government shoots its own people. 19 dead, hundreds wounded. Social media ban sparked protests. AFIPN condemns state violence. And I agree, and this is why I also wanted to read out this article from the Australian Free Independent Press Network as well. So, blood on the streets of Nepal. Governments shoot its own people for daring to speak out. 19 young lives are gone. Hundreds more are wounded, all because the Nepalese government thought the best way to silence its citizens was to cut off their voices and open fire when they fought back. Sound familiar? On September 8, Nepal erupted after authorities moved to block 26 major social media platforms. These were not obscure apps. They included Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, WhatsApp, and others. For Gen Z in Nepal, this was not simply about scrolling feeds. It was about connection, communication, and being heard in a country where corruption and unaccountable leadership are daily realities. When thousands took to the streets, the government could have listened. Instead, it chose bullets. Reports confirm police used tear gas, water cannons, rubber bullets, and then live ammunition against crowds of mostly young demonstrators. At least 19 protesters were killed. Many suffered gunshot wounds to the head and chest. Hospitals were overwhelmed with the injured. Even police officers were caught in the chaos, showing the scale of the state's recklessness. The international community must see this for what it is, not a breakdown of order, not an unfortunate clash. This was a deliberate act of state violence against unarmed citizens demanding freedom. The government has now backtracked, lifting the ban within hours and forcing Home Minister Ramesh Lekak to resign. But resignation after the fact does not wash the blood off the streets. It does not bring back the dead, nor does it erase the reality that a government chose to slaughter its youth rather than admit its censorship was wrong. AFIPN condemns the Nepalese government in the strongest possible terms. Killing citizens to enforce control is tyranny, not governance. It is proof of how far authorities will go when they fear the voices of their own people. The people of Nepal deserve better than a government that treats them as enemies. They deserve freedom, dignity, and leaders who understand that power comes from the people, not from the barrel of the gun. such a tragic story, and my heart goes out to all the Nepalese and the Nepalese community here in South Australia or across Australia. Such a tragic event, but it also resonates with the topics that we're talking about. And it's, do we really want Australia to have that Nepalese moment? We already had terrible situations, terrible scenes that come out of Victoria with rubber bullets being fired on their population, unarmed citizens at the Shrine of Remembrance trying to find solace, solitude from corruption and the attacks from the military equipped Victorian police force. And we've seen that happen. So when will Australia have their Nepalese moment? If we don't stand up, push back, and the government doesn't start to listen, and the bureaucrats and the media stops fanning division and hate and labels, we're going to have that moment here in Australia. And I urge South Australian police and police around Australia broadly, urge you to find restraint, discernment, question the sort of stuff that the government's requesting you to do. I absolutely do not want to see Australia head down and have their Nepalese moment. So my thoughts and prayers are with the Nepalese community on that one. Such sad news coming out of there. Now, changing tactic and changing direction again to another little. So I did mention there's going to be quite heavily focused on South Australia here, and so I did want to cover a story from the Women's Forum. Has sent through a request for people to sign a petition to protect girls' rights in South Australian schools. So girls in South Australian schools are being forced to sacrifice their privacy, safety and fairness. Under current Department of Education policy, male students who identify as female can access girls' toilets and change rooms where overnight accommodation and compete in female sporting events, share overnight accommodation. Already, girls have been told to use disabled toilets if they feel uncomfortable sharing bathrooms with boys, and a male student has broken multiple girls' school sporting records. These examples show how the policy is already undermining girls' rights and opportunities. Girls deserve dignity and protection and a level playing field. Join us in calling on Premier Peter Malinauskas to guarantee single-sex facilities, accommodation and sports for girls in every South Australian school. So you can jump on there. Again, I'll put the link in my Substack, womensforumaustralia.org. Protect SA Girls is the handle on that. So if you sign that, petition there, it'll take you to another page where there's some instructions or some guidance about how to write to your to the Premier and also people within the education system as well, key education bodies as well. So once you've done that, you can look at getting some support and assistance with articulating a letter, preferably majority of it in your own words, but there's some examples there for you as well. So, and we've obviously had that case with a Catholic school in South Australia having a transgender child there as well, and accommodating, and parents raising concerns and others raising concerns about that. So look, it is a topical issue, and obviously with private schools, even though they do still get some government funding, it's heavily funded by student fees by parents. So it's definitely something that if parents have an issue, need to address that with the schools individually, but parents have an option here to really get involved and talk into this topic with the Premier and others who hopefully will listen to a multitude of people raising concerns about this. Now, just a closing quick story I wanted to talk about, which made the news because it's just newly released report in regards to it. This is in regards to Peter Malinauskas and Belgravia, and with them receiving $1 million of South Australian taxpayer funds. So, look, the SA Premier Peter Malinauskas advised a department to give $1 million to Belgravia apparel in error ombudsman fines. Peter Malinauskas unknowingly approved a $1 million taxpayer grant to an SA business after an administrative error slipped through in a bundle of routine paperwork. What we have seen time and time again for Peter Malinauskas and his government is that it is easier and more convenient to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. And those are the words that is the advertiser, come out of the advertiser there. So, and so I thought I'd talk into it just briefly, at a bit of an overview for people about that didn't know too much about that, and I'll just cover that a little bit. A little bit of a background into that. So here's what's happened. So in March 2022, ahead of the South Australian state election, the SA Labor Party pledged a manufacturing innovation grants program and announced at Belgravia Apparel's premises. After winning the election, rather than launching the promised competitive program, the government issued a $1 million grant directly to Belgravia Apparel. The grant was included erroneously in a stack of letters for the Premier, Peter Malinauskas, to sign, resulting from a miscommunication and an administrative transition. Ombudsman's findings. The SA Ombudsman Emily Strickland, after a 2-year preliminary assessment published September 5 this year, so not that long ago, determined there was no misconduct or maladministration, but a rather flawed administrative process and lack of clarity during post-election system transitions. She opted not to launch a formal investigation, believing it wasn't in the public interest, though she described the circumstances as concerning and provided a detailed report. The record showed that Cabinet had clarified there was no pre-election commitment to Belgravia, and the erroneous inclusion in the Premier's letter was the key breakdown. The response and reforms. The government stated that following the error, it issued a new Cabinet and Executive Council decisions circular to clarify decisions-making procedures and avoid future mistakes. Officials also noted that the grant had, in the meantime, facilitated Belgravia expanding operations, increasing manufacturing capacity, and creating jobs in SA, so positively framing the outcome. Opposition voices such as Liberal spokesman Ben Hood criticised the government for what they saw as lack of accountability and transparency. And again, I've used those words quite a bit because that's what people are sick of, is lack of accountability and transparency, labelling the whole incident as bungling despite the Ombudsman ruling on that. So that little bit of a breakdown is, and the sources for that breakdown is from Adelaide Now and the ABC, in that little bit of a summary of what's happened there. But just wanted to give a little bit of an overview of Belgravia for those that don't know. It varies. Estimates suggest Belgravia Apparel employs 100 plus people, with some sources indicating between 201 and 500 employees from CompWorth Lead IQ. The company processes more than 250,000 orders annually, supplies over 900,000 apparel items, and operates a warehouse that dispatches over 2,000 orders per day, with an embroidery capacity exceeding 1,000 garments per day. Client reach, they serve a broad customer base including 50,000 plus clients across sectors such as corporate government, supports and schools, and manage 300 plus online storefronts for both elite and community customers. So government, so they do have a contract with government, and obviously schools, obviously public schools, publicly funded. So on top of that, that contract to the government, they've just received $1 million of taxpayer money for their operations and supposed additional employees and so forth. So Lead IQ reports revenue at approximately 35 million as of mid-2025, with a broad range of around 10 million to 50 million, and that's from Lead IQ. So that gives you a bit of an overview, but I say that's a pretty big stuff up there of $1 million $1 million of South Australian taxpayer money going to an organisation that seems to be going pretty well, is sort of a medium-ish size corporate business. And I just wanted to reflect on that a little bit. I'm sure that through COVID, we saw a lot of struggling businesses. We've seen bankruptcies. We've seen small family businesses really, really struggle. I'm pretty sure they would have appreciated a bit of a cut from that $1 million as well. So I hope that the government and Peter Malinauskas in that office do take this very, very seriously, and they really look at this in much more detail, because there's so many companies, small businesses, and things that would have benefited greatly from a bit of a split up of that $1 million, rather than going to a quite successful company, even though they assert that it employed additional people with those funds and ended up expanding operations and so forth. So look, there's a lot to digest. There's a lot wrong. My point is that the legacy government, Labor and Liberal, the Greens, need a massive shake-up. We need some new people in there. For me, looking to run as an independent in the Legislative Council, I've given my thoughts and views on the Legislative Council and Senate structures. I believe it needs to be much more independent for that effective separations of powers. That message to South Australia Police, I really hope you have a real good think and discern the information provided to you, and you can choose obviously to do nothing with it, but in the other side of things you can choose to discern and maybe check your conscience and see how you might react to those additional powers being awarded to our state and federal governments through the international health regulations amendments, but here in South Australia the emergency management amendments as well. So look, covered a bit. As I said, I'll be there on the 13th, on the weekend. If you're there, by all means, jump in and say good day. And if you would like, obviously, to support my endeavours and initiatives, then and help me sign, get over 250 signatures of 250 nominators for my run in. For my run in March, then by all means do that as well. So look, I thank you for your time. Really appreciate you hanging around. And as always, I like to finish on a little bit of a tune. So today's little tune is Jesus in Blues, and it's from let's have a look. It's from it's called Rise and Walk. So hopefully enjoy. God bless South Australia, and hope to talk to you all very, very soon, because I'm looking to get some interviews going, and I'm going to spend the next 6 months really getting information out to South Australians to help them to discern how they vote, what they vote on, why they should change their voting habits and so forth. So until then, good luck and God bless.
The crowd pressed tight. 4 men brought a soul who'd lost his fight. They tore through the roof, let him down low, right at the feet of the one who knows. Jesus looked and saw their faith, said, "Son, thy sins be gone without trace." They murmured, "Only God can forgive this talk." But he said, "Take up thy bed and walk." The man rose up with strength brand new. His legs obeyed what his heart once knew. The people watched in holy fear as grace stood tall and drew them near, to show he had power not just to heal, but to cleanse the soul with heaven's seal. He spoke with boldness, calm and true, and turned a crowd into witnesses too. Yeah, thy sins are gone. And then the call, take up thy bed, walk out that hall. And so he did, with praise and joy. A healed man, no longer a broken boy. Still he calls to hearts that fall. Rise up, believe, and hear my call. Forgiveness walks where faith is strong, and grace has legs to carry.